Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Colette Watson, and this is Free Press Live, your weekly source for updates and live discussion of what's happening in the world of communications rights. Please tune in, please let us know rather where you're tuning in by chiming in the comments on Facebook or on YouTube, where we're live every week on Wednesdays at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for watching. Today, we're talking about local news power. Traditional and legacy media outlets have dominated what we know, think, and feel about our legacy communities for generations. But right now, change is afoot. We are joined by two incredible founders of local news projects who are part of the Tiny News Collective. And that is a cohort of 6 founders who are going to be changing the landscape of local media in their communities. Today, we'll talk with Brit Harley and Crystal Good about why they started their own organizations and what local news power shifts could mean for the future of our world. So you'll make sure you will stay tuned. We'll be right back with today's headlines after this. So yesterday, Tuesday, August 3rd, marked the second anniversary of the deadly El Paso shooting, in which a gunman killed 23 people and injured 23 more at a Walmart in the deadliest attack targeting the Latinx community in modern history. The shooter published a 2,300-word manifesto online that promoted white supremacist theories and celebrated other racially motivated shootings. In a statement, Free Press Action co-CEO Jessica Gonzalez, who co-founded the Change the Terms Coalition, made the following statement. Today, we honor the memory of the grandparents, parents, and children whose lives were tragically ended 2 years ago when a white supremacist traveled to El Paso to target their loving and tight-knit Latinx community. Our hearts are heavy as we reflect on the bravery of those who fought to save their family and friends and continue to heal in the aftermath of this tragedy. The El Paso shooter, whose online manifesto mirrored racist rants from Donald Trump and other white supremacists who labeled the Latinx community as invaders to millions, that shooter is not the last to share deadly words aimed at Latinos and immigrants on social media. No social media platform has outright banned white supremacists, and Donald Trump was allowed to post on social media for years, despite his outsized role in elevating hate and lies against the Latinx community. Make no mistake, online hate is killing us, and it's critical for social media platforms to take steps, concrete steps, to disrupt racist disinformation online. To learn more about Jessica's work with the Change the Terms Coalition, visit changetheterms.org. In other news this week, the U.S. Senate set the stage for action on a sprawling infrastructure package, which contains billions in broadband funding, according to fiercetelecom.com. On Friday morning, the Senate approved a motion to proceed with a newly negotiated version of the legislation, which includes the Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment Program, which sets aside over $42 billion for a new broadband deployment. The bill calls for $100 million to be allocated to each of the states, and the program would provide grants to eligible entities to bridge the digital divide. This legislature also includes the Middle Mile Grant Program, which would support deployment of middle mile infrastructure to the tune of $1 billion, and the Affordable Connectivity Program, which is an extension of the existing Emergency Broadband Benefit Program, which we hope you signed up for. If you're not sure how to do that, please visit ebbhelp.org, presented by our friends at Media Justice. So, switching back to today's conversation, we're here to talk about local news power. And we have two members of the first cohort of Tiny News Collective to give us the inside scoop on what's happening within that cohort and in the broader conversation around local news. So local news isn't just rescuing cats from trees, y'all. It's about knowing who holds power in our communities and how to make sure that power ultimately rests in the hands of people, a concept some call democracy or believe is critical for another concept, justice. So whatever you call it, let us know in the comments why you think local news is important. To us, we know that local news keeps communities safe and informed, but it's getting harder and harder to find locally produced news media. So Tiny News Collective describes itself as a new partnership providing the tools, resources, and commonwealth of knowledge to help people build sustainable news. And on today's episode of Free Press Live, we're joined by two media makers who are part of that cohort, and with the help of grant funding from Tiny News Collective and Google News Initiative, they're doing amazing things. I'd like to welcome Brit Harley, founder of 5 Wards Media based in Newark, New Jersey, and Crystal Good, founder of Black by God, based in Princeton, West Virginia. Thank you both for being here. Brit, I'll start with you. Introduce yourself and tell us about what you've got going on.
Thanks, Colette, and thank you, Free Press, for having me. I'm Brit Harley, based in Newark, New Jersey, and I'll be launching 5 Boards Media with the Tiny News Collective. We'll be building on the work. For the last year, I've worked on a project called the Newark News and Story Collaborative, which is really about filling information gaps here in the city of Newark. And also, we created a community media training program to train residents to tell different narratives and to be thinking about how we can fill these gaps together here. And so 5 Boards Media will be an extension of that, really looking at how we can really serve our community, their needs, their wants, different stories that they would like to see and hear about their community, their neighborhoods, and also informing them in the ways that they would like to be informed.
Fantastic. I'm so excited. And I have to mention, or our tech director, Vanessa Maria, might just get me. I have to mention that Brit Harley is a part of was our first News Voices fellow there in New Jersey. So big shout out to you, Brit. We are so fortunate to have you in the Free Press family. And big shout out to you too, Crystal Good, who is a part of our consortium over at the Media 2070 project here at Free Press. So thank you for being part of the Free Press family. Tell us about Black by God. I want to hear where that name came from and just let the people know who you are.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm Crystal Good, and I'm building Black by God, the West Virginian. And I'll start with the name first. So Black by God, the West Virginian, you know, in West Virginia, we got to let other people know that we're not Virginia a lot of the time. So there's an expression which is West by God, Virginia. And nobody really knows sort of what the genesis of the phrase is. There's some imagination there with it started when the state was becoming a state that, someone exclaimed, we're by God, West Virginia. Or maybe it was the WVU basketball team that won when they were coming through the hotel back to celebrate. A reporter yelled, "It's West by God, Virginia." But I tend to think that it started with a woman named Bricktop, who is from Alderson, West Virginia. And if you look her up, you will be amazed. She's taught Josephine Baker the Charleston and on in the 1920s. And everywhere that she went, she would claim, "I'm from West by God, Virginia." So I've taken that name and called it Black by God, the West Virginian, as a way to sort of take ownership in the voices and history of Black West Virginians inside of West Virginia. So that's what I'm building, is a newspaper called Black by God, the West Virginian. And our goal is to amplify and celebrate and give the microphone to Black communities inside West Virginia.
Wonderful. Well, we're so grateful for your labor there in West Virginia, yours as well, Brit, and to have you today. I want to stick with you for a second, Crystal. What was happening in West Virginia that made you want to start a local media organization, which I can only imagine?
Well, this is a dream of mine since I was 16 years old. When I was 16 years old, I tried to buy the last Black newspaper in West Virginia. How and why I thought I could do this, I don't know. I was on my yearbook team and the school newspaper, and I thought, I should own a newspaper. My dad, who's also in news, he's been a longtime news director in West Virginia for television. He sort of brokered the deal, and he came back and said, baby girl, they're not going to sell you the newspaper, but you can sell ads for them. And that kind of stuck with me as a little burr in the crawl, but it stayed with me. And as that paper, which is the Beacon Digest, which the Starks family ran for generations, as it started to go away and publications were sporadic, I just really recognized that, wait a minute, there is no voice in West Virginia. And then I started getting curious about, well, how many, Black reporters or non-white male reporters does West Virginia have? And was coming up with very little answers, other than when the West Virginia Press Association said that in 35 years, they only knew of 3 Black reporters, and I was one of them. So that was sort of my catalyst into, it's now or never. And then just sort of seeing the changing landscape of journalism and the opportunity. And I am really glad to be here because, not only in this conversation, but with Tiny News and with WVU New Start program and all the other happenings that are starting to really recognize and change the landscape of how we create and sustain local news.
That's fantastic. Now I'm going to turn to you, Brit. I feel like communities like those in West Virginia, we don't hear enough about here in the communities outside of West Virginia, right? I feel like we don't get enough information. And though when we start talking about certain issues, it feels like West Virginia is one of the most impacted by a lot of the systemic oppression and issues that we talk about. When I think about Newark, I feel like it's almost the opposite problem. There's a whole lot of people talking about Newark that don't know anything about Newark. So I'm so glad to hear that you started 5 Wards Media. I would love to hear why that name also on your end, and what was happening that made you want to start 5 Wards Media.
So the name 5 Wards Media comes from literally our city, Newark. So if you see Newark, it says Newark, but we don't say Newark. That's how we onto you and know that you're not from here. It's Newark. That's how we say it. And so 5 Wards Media is really thinking about, how do we bring our city together? How do we share resources, information? Newark is broken up into 5 wards. And so I wanted to create something that the community could also have pride in. And that's a bit about the name, and really why I threw my hat in the bucket with lots and lots of encouragement from folks around me to even jump out and create this extension of the work. One thing that I realized as the News Voices Fellow from 2019 to 2020 and this past year, formerly the community engagement reporter at WBGO, Newark Public Radio, which is really the springboard to a lot of this work, I just realized we were training folks in the community, and where would they go to pitch these narratives, to pitch these stories, to publish them? I came up against a lot of challenges from people just saying yes to collaborating with us, to taking a different type of collaborative approach to telling stories and filling information gaps in our community. And so in order for us to really exercise our own independence to say that we're going to do things our way, and also really look at the different folks in this community who are directly impacted by different injustices we usually don't hear about, or we know a lot about here locally, and really how can we band together as a community to not just share information, but also resources. And so that's what we're looking to do and continue to grow with 5 Wards Media, but also cultivating a space for Black and Brown folks here in the city, immigrants, Indigenous folks, where they can tell their own stories and tell different types of narratives, and we can hear from folks and center folks we usually don't hear from in the media and news landscape.
That's great to hear, Britt. When you talk about that landscape, and you mentioned a word there, independent, so much of our media landscape is defined by these monopolies or these huge corporate entities that our folks do so much to, improve or fight to make better, because they do take up so much of the oxygen. But there's another conversation in which folks like yourselves are independently saying, I'm going to start a thing right outside of that context. to where we are locally grounded and accountable in a real way. I want to ask you, what do you think are the biggest obstacles for independent media makers of color? And particularly, how has that shown up on your journey? I'll start with Crystal and I'll come back to you, Britt.
Well, money. I mean, you it's capital. It's just like, right now I'm needing to do something and I can't do it. And and it's very frustrating, for some of the basic simple things as you're building something. But everybody needs capital. Everybody needs money. But I think also in that is sort of just like where I'm starting from. Right. How I entered in, my background as a poet, performer, marketing person, right. Not as a newsroom journalist, just trying to sort of reshape who gets to tell stories and inside myself, and then also communicating that to others. So reframing there, who gets to be a journalist. Right. And then also just, sharing of resources. Right. Like, how do you build a Black news entity inside someplace like rural Appalachia, where basically it hasn't been done, right? It hasn't been done in 2020 or 2019. So for me, it's really these opportunities to connect with people and the opportunity to share resources that is valuable currency to me.
That makes sense. What would you say, Britt?
Yeah, I'll just veggie back on what Crystal just mentioned. Outside of like capital and funding, of course, I think it's also that partnership, and just the understanding of like how folks can be more welcoming to community media. I know some of the challenges that I experienced just taking a different approach, working with resident reporters, training folks on the ground, on the front lines to tell different types of stories. There weren't a lot of people who wanted to say yes. To publish these stories, to work with us on these stories. And so really just having support and buy-in for folks to really not be married to that traditional nature of like how journalism has been done. And also just taking cues from the community and also capacity. I know, same with Crystal, we've had our own conversations even prior to coming into Tiny News together. But people, when it's just you, is but so many things that you can do. And of course, capital helps with capacity. And so that's what I'll add on there in terms of some of the challenges.
So you said capacity, capital, and I'm going to add a third C, collectivity. Is that a word? That's a word, right? Collectivity.
It could be collectivity. So,
thank you. And I'm glad you mentioned there, Britt, Tiny News Collective, which I'm guessing brings some of that collectivity or collectiveness to the equation to support both of you in your journeys as independent media makers. So I want to ask you another question, but before I do, I want to let our viewers know, first of all, thank you for tuning in. You are watching Free Press Live, your weekly source for updates on the world of communications rights. I'm here with Brit Harley and Crystal Good, who are part of the first cohort of the Tiny News Collective, and we're talking about local news power. I asked earlier, and y'all are being a little unruly today, viewers. I don't see anyone in the comments letting me know where you're tuning in from, but I see you here. Okay, the magic of Megan Thee Stallion's internet is that I can see folks are watching us. So let me know where you're tuning in from. I'm coming in live from Arizona, and we're here again with Crystal Good of West Virginia and Brit Harley of Newark. Nah, I can't say it like y'all, but almost-ish, Newark, New Jersey. So, Brit, tell me, what does it feel like to be part of that first cohort of the Tiny News Collective and gaining access to not just the collectivity, but I think a little bit of capital and some capacity there? I think. What is that experience like, and what makes you excited about it?
I mean, we literally just jumped into the thing this week. What I'm excited about is that that capacity part, like a lot of the things on the back end that would kind of keep you held up or tied up or maybe kind of slow down some of those processes. that we'll have that back end support. I think also what I'm most excited about is like doing this together with folks like Crystal, who's amazing and awesome. And I'm looking forward to like how much I'll be able to like learn from her and how we can work together. So I'm really excited about like building and launching the thing with other folks who are in their cities doing the same thing. And it's like we're where we are, but we also are doing it together. So I'm really excited to like launch these purpose driven, mission driven, community driven local news entities with a squad, with family, and with support.
Yes. Crystal, what's exciting to you about the Tiny News Collective and being in that first cohort?
Well, what was fun is, Britt and I had talked about, this tiny news thing. A wonderful reporter and journalist, Jake Wasserman, introduced us, and then, did the application and had a conversation with Britt about what she's doing. I was like, that's what I got to do. I got to do exactly what she's doing. And around community journalism. And then, bam, we both applied and we both got in. And so we get to continue that conversation, inside the structure of Tiny News. And it just started. But it is, when you were asking about the things that I need to build this, it is the back end. And I really probably need to stop saying that Tiny News is helping me with my back end, because that could that could mean a couple of things. But it's like really the things that you need to build a newsroom. It's your website plugin. It's a fundraising platform. It's all of that would take years, I believe, to really to teach yourself how to do that. And we're in a crash course of it. So I'm really thankful, and I'm thankful for the community that has already reached out to me just from getting a free press tweet and getting attention to what I'm building in West Virginia.
That's great, Crystal. I think we at Free Press are honored to be associated with both of you, with Black by God and with Five Wards Media. And as we're unfortunately moving to wrap up here, because as you know, Free Press Live is just 30 minutes. We just go in hot talking about communications and human rights here. I do want to give you the opportunity to tell me a little bit more just about what you're looking to do in terms of impact on your community. Because as I'm listening to you both, Britt mentioned being purpose driven and mission driven. I realize that you're not just in it for the clicks. You're not in it for the revenues per se. You want to be able to do what you need to do with abundance, right? But it sounds like you're really very much in tune with the potential of media to really impact and improve even the community and live realities for folks. So I just wonder, what is it that you all are looking to deliver to your community through your media? And I want to give you a second to think about that and say a few words to some of the folks who did chime in the comments. Thank you very much. I had to go, teacher on y'all. That is part of my past repertoire, but and scold you a little bit, but you came through for me. So Jay Smith says, John Sonnen says they are tuning in from Tingett Land, and I'm probably mispronouncing that, so I apologize. Tingett Land on Douglas Island near Juneau, Alaska. Did y'all think you were going to Alaska today? Because I didn't know I would be. And I'm grateful. Thank you, John Sonnen. And that's he, him, us, we, they. Understood. And then Ellie Nesser is tuning in from Vantage Ventures in Morgantown, West Virginia. Crystal, so proud of you for Black by God newspaper here in West Virginia. Thank you, Ellie. We really appreciate you tuning in. And I think y'all may know the great Joseph Torres tuning in from Silver Spring, Maryland, New York Times best-selling author of News for All the People, the epic story of race in media. Joe does not like to be the center of attention, but I have to plug him because that is a brilliant book he co-authored with Juan Gonzalez. Thank you all for tuning in and everyone else who's watching. So I want to repeat my question. Of course, today's topic on Free Press Live is local news power. What are you looking to do with your local news power? And I'm going to start with you, Britt, and then come back to you, Crystal, before we wrap up today.
Oh, so much. I know we on a time crunch. Local news power impact. Impact. bringing people together to fellowship. I think why I called this Five Wards Media, we're all impacted sometimes by the same issues, but when you are in a local news or media desert, it's sometimes hard to connect those things. So impact for me looks like galvanizing people around the information that we need, creating a way for community members to also access us, to let us know what we're doing well, what we can do better, how we can serve them, and just really getting in this flow where, you know, community feels like they're a part of it, and it's not necessarily something happening to them, is happening with them. And so I'm looking forward to really shifting a lot of the narratives that exist and how we can collaborate and work together for the things that we need, want, and desire and are passionate about having in our communities and in our neighborhoods.
Yes, nothing about us without us. And Crystal?
Well, I guess I get to say everything Britt said, right? But you know, for me, it looks like building a folk reporters program, and that's just a name that I'm calling citizens journalists, and how can I, you know, connect with communities to give them the microphone to tell their stories and the tools to be able to do that, while also doing, you know, some deep investigative work about some of the issues in West Virginia, and be a road into West Virginia, but also out of West Virginia. I think at the simplest form, you know, Black by God is a witness. And that's one of the things that, you know, I think changes changes the dynamics, right? Is just when someone's watching and paying attention. And I can already tell, even with Black by God and our little newsletter for a year and our one little print, we are bearing witness, and that changes the room.
Yes, it does. Well, you have certainly changed this room here on Free Press Live today. We are just very much, we're lucky to have had you talking to us, because I suspect that each of you and your organizations are going to grow exponentially, and we will not even be able to probably get a direct call into you anymore soon. And so I'm glad that you responded so enthusiastically when we invited you today. Thank you so much for joining us, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Colette. You already know. We know who you are in the world. So thank you. Thank you.
I do. And listen, you know what? I almost forgot. Speaking of being together and the impact that y'all are going to have and already having, Crystal shared a few illustrations from Black by God. And I just want to give you the chance, Crystal, to speak to those before we get out of here today. Would you tell us a little bit about the illustrations?
Yes. So, you know, what part of how I'm thinking about news is how can we use different mediums to tell stories, and illustrations and memes and political cartoons, I think, are one way. So, you know, we've been kind of plugging along with these cartoons. Joe Manchin gives us a lot of content in West Virginia to be able to connect with a local audience, but also a national audience. So support blackbygod.com. Help us keep these little cartoons and illustrations growing. If anyone is listening and they're in West Virginia and they want to be a part of our editorial cartoon board, just reach out to me. All ideas are welcome. And that's about it. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing those illustrations. They're really funny, y'all. So we'll make sure to write up this episode and link to Crystal. And honestly, as you've seen on the screen a couple times today, thanks to our amazing tech director, you can learn more at blackbygod.org, as well as fivewardsmedia.com. Is that right? Did I get your web address correct, Brit? Newarkstories.com. Okay, I see I was lying there.
We're still working on it, but you can find us on newarkstories.com.
That's wonderful. And I apologize for my quick bit of disinformation there, but y'all cleared me right on up. Speaking of which, one of our commenters says that local news keeps the locality, all locals on the same page, no functioning disinformation. And in this age of the COVID pandemic, the uprising for Black lives, and so much more that is fast changing and dynamic every day, our local folks need information to stay safe. And we appreciate both of you for what you're doing to make that real in your community. So thank you again for being here today.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you so much.
unfortunately, I have to say goodbye to you, but not a true goodbye, just for now. Ta-ta for now. And we know that we will see Britt and Crystal and so many others again here on Free Press Live, your source for news and updates from the world of communications rights. Again, Free Press Live airs every Wednesday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, live via Facebook and YouTube. Just search for Free Press and you will find us. You can learn more about our work and how you can take action at freepress.net. And remember, Free Press doesn't accept any funding from government or corporations. You can help keep this work going by donating now at freepress.net/donate. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next Wednesday on Free Press Live.